On January 29th of 2025, the tragic mid-air collision occurred near Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, DCA, resulting in the deaths of all 67 individuals aboard an American Airlines regional jet and U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter. While the investigation is ongoing, early reports indicate severe staffing shortages in the DCA air traffic control tower, a problem that has plagued the Federal Aviation Administration for years, like literally going back to about 1981. Today, we welcome retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, an expert in criminal investigations. Let's talk about the aviation incident here and the systematic failures with the regulatory oversight. Let's examine the developments in this case and dissect the evidence and dig a little bit deeper into this. Given your expertise in the federal investigations, when you look at the case, do you see a systematic failure that could have been prevented? And what is the first thing that stands out to you from an investigative standpoint?
Well, Tony, when you look at this investigatively, it's jaw dropping, really, because I know most of us have seen the footage, and
Hmm.
it makes absolutely no sense that the Black Hawk literally just, it looks to the naked eye, beelines toward that
Yeah.
airline. There's no fluctuation in elevation, there's no fluctuation in heading. It's just a straight on, and you just ask yourself, how in the world could that happen? And then now we know about the release of information that uh, they actually were told, but was it too late for them to then go to their uh, you know uh, instruments into their ability to actually change direction and change altitude and avoid that? And then of all the questions, Tony, about, when you're flying with instruments, you're really not looking out. I mean, the most famous case is JFK.
Hmm.
How did JFK die? But when you're flying uh, at night, or when it's white all around and all you can see is clouds, you're flying by instruments.
Hmm.
You're not flying visually.
Hmm.
And in fact, that's how pilots fly.
Yeah.
So, um, but still, how this happened, I mean, you see the FBI is out there in full force collecting evidence, and there's a lot for the NTSB to go through, and there's a lot for the FBI to go through.
There is. It's really stunning. I know when it happened, my phone started blowing up with folks from Wichita. I know you are from there. I worked there for about 10 years, so it hits a little closer to home, I think, for some of us, even though I didn't know anybody on those planes. But it's like I've flown that exact route from Wichita to Reagan several times back when I was doing a show on Travel Channel. And I remember, flying in there, and it's like it's a scary place to land. I mean, you think, okay, everybody's, they got this down, they know what they're doing. But if you're just looking around, it's like, God, there's things going everywhere, and you got to get way down. And it's other than like flying into like Newark, that's another one that's not the most fun. It's just, yeah. I mean, I think you have more room for error, more room for something to go wrong. But they've been saying for years, decades, they knew that this was a problem, and it's a airport that continues to be plagued with near misses. It's just, to me, it feels like luck has finally run out on this.
Yes, everything had to line up, right? I mean, when
Yeah.
you look at the pilots in that Black Hawk, Tony, this is another thing that really hit me. They were all very experienced.
Hmm.
I know it was a training exercise, but by that they meant they just weren't operational.
Hmm.
In other words, they were training their night ops,
Hmm.
working on becoming even more uh, adept at flying at night, flying a helicopter at night. And it's mind-boggling to me that this could happen. It also with these experienced pilots is what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
and there's a lot of questions now about, their normal height, their elevation, I should say, that they fly at, and were they 100 feet above that? And if so, why were they? There's just so many questions that don't add up. I'm going to be quite frank.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that. But first, I want to talk about the staffing shortages and all the issues that have been at the FAA for decades, literally. Um, they just can't get enough people, and they haven't been able to, literally, since about 81. So we're talking, what, 43 years here of having the same issue and never really finding a solution to it. I know it takes years to go through training. I guess, why on earth have we never fixed this problem when we know it's a glaring problem? We have near miss after near miss, and the number has been going up over the last handful of years pretty significantly of those near misses, and those are the ones that we know about. We're now finding out that there was a near miss the day before this took place, and there was another one the week before, and then you keep looking, and there's a lot. It's just baffling to me that this hasn't been some sort of a priority, or let's re-examine our systems, let's re-examine how we're doing this. And it seems like a lot of excuses have been made as to why you have someone in the air traffic control tower that's doing two people's jobs. I mean, they just finally put into place last year, 2024, the mandatory time of being downtime before getting back into those towers. I guess, why? Why? It is all bureaucratic red tape. This We've been very lucky that we haven't had more of these, I guess.
Tony, I'm really glad you brought up this point. I know I've discussed it briefly before, but for about 5 years, I handled in large part crime aboard aircraft matters at the DFW airport,
Hmm.
which is again 18,000 acres, hundreds of thousands of commuters, hundreds of thousands of employees, and a city, by the way, most
Hmm.
people don't realize
Yeah.
in and of itself. It's huge. And that airport, there were always issues in terms of staffing.
Hmm.
And I can tell you, personally, knowing a air traffic controller, not in the business realm as an FBI agent,
Hmm.
but a tennis player that I
Hmm.
play with.
Yeah.
And she would come with the worst stories just to tennis matches. And she actually would say, does anyone want to be an air traffic controller? We have no one. You don't have to have any specialized degree. You don't need anything other than come to our trainings, get trained up in it, and you can be one.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking, wow, is that really the truth? I think you do have to have extensive training,
Yeah.
I think, from what she told me. I've never done an investigation into an air traffic controller, but I can tell you, as working in that industry for years at DFW, it's a problem staffing, understaffing.
But how long can they keep saying we're understaffed? Yes, I mean, every business usually at sometimes is understaffed, and you figure out how to make that work. It doesn't usually have to take 43 years to fix that problem. And I don't. I'm just baffled by this because we see it so often. We hear near misses every single year, and it's still like, okay, why can't we fix this? Does nobody want to be an air traffic controller? I mean, it's not a great job the way it's set up as of right now. 6 days a week, mandatory overtime. They finally last year said 10 hours between you and the tower and getting back into the tower. Not exactly anything I think anybody really wants to sign up for if you have other options, unless you're just hell bent on being an air traffic controller. What needs to change in this system so we can get the people that we need, get them qualified to do the job professionally, effectively, knowledgeably, and so we don't have to constantly have this many near misses? Or is it, and this obviously was not a near miss, or is it one of those things that is simply inevitable with the sheer amount of air traffic that we have in this country, especially at large airports?
I don't think it's inevitable. I think the biggest problem is understaffing with that piece of it.
Hmm.
Again, would that have resolved this issue? Again, when you're in the tower, the best you can do is communicate. But
Hmm.
Tony, at the end of the day, you have to hope that the pilots are responsible and are doing their job,
Yeah.
looking out for fellow, aircraft in the air. But back to your point, it's got to take incentives. And Trump is a businessman.
Hmm.
That's what he is. And he's running our country now, at least from what I've seen, like he would run one of his business. You're fired.
Hmm.
You're out. You mess up, you're gone. And you would think he would incentivize this strongly. I mean, he's already offered uh, all federal employees this huge 8-month, I believe it is, incentive. We'll pay you 8 months salary.
Hmm.
And I do want to tell everybody, this isn't that new.
Hmm.
I've never seen it this, across all federal jobs, but
Yeah.
in the FBI, they did that about every, I was there for 25 years and I know it happened at least twice where because they wanted to get out the old salaries, the old fat, and incentivize people to leave. So this isn't new.
Yeah.
The
I-
cut salary, but you can't do it right. To me, you can't do this in an industry that is begging and understaffed.
Yeah, I mean, his arguments already have made little to no sense, saying it's like a DCA type thing. Look, I think the FAA is willing to take
Yeah,
anyone and everyone who's willing to apply for the job and is qualified. That's not a place where it's like, let's really go for diversity here. It's like, do you have a pulse? Are you qualified to do this job? I don't care if you're glowing green. You are welcome to be here. That does not seem to be remotely the issue in this specific case. So I was kind of troubled by that right away. It's like, no, you should be looking at the FAA. You should be looking at the understaffing issues. It's not an equal opportunity issue in something like this. Anyway, I digress. I'm not trying to make this political. I'm just saying facts. With that being said, I want to go to the things that don't make sense here in a moment, but I want to ask you just kind of a personal question. You fly a heck of a lot more than I do. I mean, how do you feel? You know what's going on here. You've personally heard the stories from an air traffic controller of just how understaffed it is and how close things can come. I mean, we've all heard, things that are released out publicly, but I'm sure you have knowledge of things more on the inside too. How safe have you felt out there, knowing we haven't had a crash like this in the U.S. for about 15 years, but just so many close calls?
I never feel safe when I go up for a multitude of reasons. I mean, first of all, I, in knowing the mechanical issues that happen with planes and the mechanics, again, being assigned to these airports and in
Hmm.
this huge industry and knowing uh, who's working on the planes. And there's been a lot of stories recently, obviously, about issues with how planes are built. I mean, I'm always concerned. And then knowing the issues with the tower in terms of lack of individuals there
Hmm.
to cover as air traffic control, it's always concerning. And I fly all the time.
Hmm.
Uh, but I've never really seen personally exactly a close miss.
Hmm.
But I'll tell you what, I can't tell you how many times I literally look out the window and I see a plane right there, and I keep thinking, "Aren't we kind of close?"
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've thought that many times, and then we'll ascend way high or something. But no, I'm always concerned.
Yeah, I mean it's a very you know just because there hasn't been a crash like this in a long time doesn't mean that we're not going to start to see a lot more of them. One of the sort of off-topic things, one of the strangest things I think I've ever seen, it was back in Wichita, and I'm guessing you've probably seen this too. When you're sitting at a rail yard or at a rail crossing, and you see these commuter jets, like the American Eagle or the whatever it was, on the trains, just the fuselages going down the tracks. It's a very weird sight to see. And then you add in all of the issues that we've been seeing from many of the companies, Boeing and such, on the quality control of their products. It's a disconcerting thought. Tell me more about your concerns. This was obviously not a mechanical issue, as far as we know, with the American Airlines, the American Eagle plane. But what are your concerns? What are some of those things that trouble you about the mechanical aspect of it, of who's servicing these planes at their respective airports?
Oh, I'm always troubled by that because you have individuals that um ooh, I've got to be careful. But you have individuals that um maybe are not as attentive as they should be.
Hmm.
I'll tell you right now, my stepfather was a beach mechanic
Hmm.
for 30 plus years.
Okay.
And the of course stories, I'm just talking personally,
Yeah.
that I heard regarding that. I mean, you have people that drink on the job, you have people that are late, you have things that are overlooked because they're late, you have things are overlooked because they get distracted and then they go back and where did they start in at. It's sort of like any job, except for now you're talking about planes
Hmm.
and plane safety. And then you have, the double checks that are supposed to be done. Thank goodness. I mean, I saw a lot of cases working. I'll give you a specific one. This was an individual who is a baggage handler, and they're responsible for uploading payloads. In other words, how much baggage, how many people are on here, and then the pilot has to use the amount of weight they have in totality on their plane to calculate how they're going to land.
Hmm.
They're doing all their figures, the velocity, everything that's involved with landing a plane. A big part of that is how heavy is your plane.
Hmm.
And this individual, this was one of the cases I worked on, this individual uh, did put thousands of pounds off in terms of what they inputted the payload to be, Tony. Thankfully, it was caught by a pilot that it just didn't make sense to him, or he would have wrecked the plane
Hmm.
because his calculations would have been completely off. It's those types of things that I think a lot of people don't understand. These just individual humans are supposed to make sure they get just right to keep us safe in the air.
Yeah, and
Uh,
it's humans, and that's the big part about this. And if you have humans that are out there doing this job and they're not the most qualified or the most professional or ethical, or aren't in a mind state to do their job correctly, that gets pretty dangerous. Is there really a lack of oversight when it comes to that area of air travel in the United States, where these things are just allowed to continue on over and over and over, and nobody does anything about it? Is it oversight, or is it again a staffing issue there where we'll take you if you have a pulse and have a remote knowledge on how to do this, or we'll train you, and you're going to get trained by somebody else who may not be the most qualified to train anyone.
Yeah, I think it's a combination again, Tony. You have so many people that probably are not doing a great job at their job. Like I said, if you're a baker and you're not doing the best job, all I have to worry about is, my bread not tasting good.
Hmm.
But this is talking about our safety.
Yeah.
So you have issues with that. But I think really the biggest issue that we're talking about here is numbers,
Yeah.
and there just not being enough people that are qualified to be in the tower
Hmm.
and that are in the towers, combined with people that are overseeing the safety mechanisms on that plane and
Hmm.
making sure everything's functioning.
Let's go back to talking about the actual crash itself and the parts that don't seem to add up very well as of yet. Granted, as of our recording, we're literally about 2 days in to this. And like anything where there's a massive tragedy, it's kind of a fog of war. And I think we're just kind of starting to get out of that as the investigations begin. But let's talk about what doesn't make a whole lot of sense here. I mean, granted, we have the air traffic control towers, they have the black boxes now, and we can see, the flight path. We can hear the radio recordings of how that all went down, and on the radar and everything, it shows exactly where these planes are at. So how did this happen? But that helicopter, I think that's the biggest question everybody has. This helicopter, as far as I can tell, and I'm no way an expert in any of this, it was in a forward motion, and it was like bumper cars. I'm not trying to be crass, but it was like it's going forward, and it looks like it just rammed into the tail of the plane. If you're in the front of the aircraft and you're flying this thing, it was not a foggy night. You would have been able to see there's an airplane directly in front of you. I don't quite get any of that. I don't think any of us quite get any of that. What's your take on just the bizarreness of how this even happened?
Well, I had a question right off the bat is why are we doing night ops in a flight path over the
Yeah.
Potomac? So I understand that they need to practice where they could possibly be called on to defend our nation's capital, et
Hmm.
cetera, et cetera. I understand that. But why are we over the Potomac in the flight path when all of us know anybody who's flown into DC, that's exactly the path? And that is the problem I have with the whole thing. I mean, this is a training exercise.
Hmm.
Um, I just, it's a head shaker, right? So, first of all, who made the decision in command, the command staff level, to do these training exercises over the Potomac where planes come and go constantly?
Yeah.
Anybody who's been in and out of DCA, you said you were,
Hmm.
I constantly flew out of there. I was assigned to headquarters.
Hmm.
Uh, and oh my goodness, I just, that was the first mind boggling thing
Yeah.
because when you take off, then the next one takes off, then people are landing. It is a zoo
Yeah.
at DCA in a very limited space.
Yeah.
It's not like DFW with, I believe now they're up to 11 landing strips and they're so far apart over acres and acres of land. This is like a funnel.
Yeah.
And so I think there needs to be a lot of questions asked at this command staff level. How did this even line up that you got these two bumper cars, as you called them, in the same area at the same time is mind boggling. And then you dial down from that, Tony. You have three very experienced pilots. We now know, it's a female that was a pilot.
Hmm.
She has not been named, but her face and her photo is out there,
Hmm.
and you wonder how and the crew was very experienced. How the lights on a plane that are so visible could not have been detected, even if you're flying instruments.
Yeah.
One person isn't assigned to look. My son's a pilot.
Hmm.
Um, he says that's exactly what you have going on. You have instruments and he's not a helicopter pilot. He's fixed wings, but you have people running through instruments, and then you have other people looking
Hmm.
for this reason. It's mind boggling,
Yeah.
really, Tony. And
I'm not going down any conspiracy angles or anything like that because I don't know. I just don't feel like there is a conspiracy here, but maybe I'm wrong. It is just mind-boggling that you could have something like this happen. I mean, and the question, who said, okay, we're going to do this training over here? Who authorized that? I mean, when I'm looking at it just as a layman, I go, well, it's because they've always done it. It's not like this is anything new to say, okay, we're going to be flying over. They're there all the time. But I mean, with the amount of close calls, why? I guess the bigger question is why hasn't anyone said, hey, maybe we should change our flight path of these helicopters and not go through an active landing zone for a commercial airport?
I agree. I couldn't agree more. And my understanding, and I am not a helicopter expert, I'm going to put that out there
Hmm.
right now. But my understanding with this Black Hawk, and maybe all Black Hawks, and my understanding of this is from my son
Hmm.
and from a helicopter pilot that's currently in Guam. That's a good friend of ours. That obviously, information from him. Black Hawks are meant to be stealthy, by the way.
Yeah.
They're not meant to be like a commercial airline jet.
Yeah.
So now you have a stealthy helicopter, you know, uh, in an area with a bunch of planes
Yeah.
flying around. It just doesn't make sense to me because I think you could still practice your training in an area other than the Potomac where people are landing and flying
Yeah.
and taking off there.
I guess I don't understand that. Why? Why are we doing this there? That to me just there's plenty of airspace. I mean, obviously it's a very busy area of the country, but it's like let's pick the busiest, most likely place where we could have an accident take place. And again, I'm wondering if, like a lot of things, sometimes it's a lot simpler than it is complex. I just wonder if it's one of those things. Well, we've been doing it for so long, we haven't had an accident yet like this, so let's keep doing it.
I agree with you, Tony. I always go back. I say this time and time again. It's usually Occam's razor. It's not this huge conspiracy. Nobody wanted to die. This
Yeah.
is likely not some sort of, death wish for anybody involved in this situation. It's just the routineness and monotony of training that you do over and over again, and you seldom change what you did before if nothing bad happened. You can bet this is going to all change.